When children enter foster care, the first placement option that our team at Clark County Family Services considers, and oftentimes the best placement option, is a relative or close family friend, also known as fictive kin. These relative caregivers could be grandma or grandpa, an auntie, an uncle. They could even be a neighbor, someone in the church, and we've even seen educators like the child's teacher step up to be that temporary foster parent. Today, I'm joined by Allie Caliendo. She's the director of Foster Kinship, which Foster Kinship is a nonprofit that is out to help stabilize and support all of these relative, fictive kin caregivers, even adoptive parents as well. So, Allie, thank you so much for joining us today on the Foster Leader podcast. Why don't you start by giving us an introduction of yourself and also Foster Kinship?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm always so excited to talk about kinship care. I personally was a foster parent. I'm now an adoptive parent and just very passionate about making sure that kids who can't live with their parents have the absolute best outcomes. And like you said, Clark County DFS always looks for relatives because we know relatives can usually provide the best outcome for children. So Foster Kinship is the nonprofit that was started in 2011, started in Clark County. We're now statewide. We've served over 10,000 kinship families, and we're just really proud to support this population. They are the absolute best people to work with.
Wow, 10,000 families since 2011. And I know in Clark County, on any given day, we have about 3,000 children in foster care, unfortunately. But what's really great is that over half of our kids are with relative or kinship caregivers. So tell me, why are kinship caregivers, why are these relatives so important for these children that come into foster care?
Well, if you put yourself in the shoes of a child who can't live with their parent for whatever reason, it's never good. I can't think of a situation that would be good. And when I think of myself as a child, would I have rather gone to live with people I don't know or to my grandma's house? And no question, in one of my family members' homes would have been better. So from a child's perspective, staying with family who knows them, loves them, more likely to keep them together with their siblings, connected to their school, church, family, all of those things are amazing. And for kids, kinship care is great. For caregivers, that's where it's a little bit harder because they're stepping in out of love, but kind of in crisis, and so starting from nothing. So kids do really well, but caregivers need to be supported.
And so you touched on keeping them in their familiar places, right? Like keeping maybe them in their neighborhood or in their school or in their church with their siblings, with their friends. Tell me why that's so important for a child in care.
Children need to know where they come from, who they belong to. They need to feel loved. And when everything changes, when you can't live with your parents, if you can have as much that is stable and similar to you, so it's not everything all at once, it's just going to improve well-being. So that's why it's so important.
And so when a relative is contacted by family services, hey, unfortunately, your grandchild or your neighbor's child is now in foster care, and would you please consider becoming a placement? Would you take this child in and care for them? There's got to be some interesting dynamics. So you've worked with so many kinship caregivers. What are some of these dynamics, and how does foster kinship support our relative and kinship caregivers?
So the first dynamic is one of love, because most caregivers, when they receive that call, they say, yes, what can I do? Where is my grandchild? What can I do to get them in my home? So that dynamic is there first. But then kinship families are faced with just the overwhelming system involvement that they weren't prepared for. And if we compare it to a traditional foster parent who has planned ahead to become a foster parent, has gone through training, kind of knows what they're stepping into, kinship families know their family, but they don't know the system, and the foster care system can be confusing. So they're faced with that dynamic and needing help navigating and understanding what's going on. That's where foster kinship steps alongside the caregiver and says, hey, we've been in your shoes, we know how this works. We're going to assign you somebody who will walk alongside you, explain the system, explain how you access resources, get you help for your child, and make sure that you don't feel overwhelmed and alone. So that's where we can step in.
So it sounds like it's really individualized for that caregiver, that, you go to foster kinship, you meet with, is it like they're assigned to the same person that they work with continuously throughout the process? What does that relationship look like?
So once they call us and get connected to our services, they will be assigned a family advocate that will walk alongside them until they feel that stability has been reached. Whether it's, have some access to financial support, I got help with the child's needs, whatever the case plan is, we're here for the caregiver as the caregiver's advocate to make sure they feel stable and confident moving forward.
Because we know when that caregiver is stable and confident and they have everything they need to care for the child, ultimately it's the children that benefit, because the children will feel that stability. They will have that safe home to return to day in and day in and day out, until they hopefully safely can return home to their families.
Yes, absolutely. And when a caregiver isn't able to access the resources available to them or is just feeling very stressed and overwhelmed, that can roll down and impact the child as well. Our main goal is to keep kids with their family, get them back to their parents. And so when things aren't stabilized, it's harder to make that happen, and kids might be more likely to enter traditional foster care. We want to prevent that as much as we can.
And when they enter traditional foster care, there's the chance that they might end up in congregate care at our emergency shelter, Child Haven, and no child should live in a shelter. Every child, we really do believe at Family Services, and we try our best to make sure that every child, if they cannot be with their own family safely, that they are with a family. So those relative caregivers, they really step up to the plate to make sure that the kids that are in their own families or in their neighborhoods, or teachers that step up as fictive kin, that those kids have a family and a home to go home to.
Yes, and if relatives didn't step up, our foster care system would literally collapse. Because not only are they caring for 50% of children in foster care, but relatives actually care for most kids who can't live with their parents. There's estimated 25,000 kids in kinship care just in Clark County. If all those kids had to enter foster care and we had to find foster parents for all of them, it's impossible. So relatives do us all a huge favor by keeping kids in the family, and we can all work together to make sure they have the support they need to keep going.
Okay, so tell me about some of the services at Foster Kinship. Let's start with the training and licensing to become a licensed caregiver, because we do know that it's beneficial when a relative accepts a child that has an open case with Family Services, that is, avoiding the traditional foster care placement, but they're with that relative. Why should those relatives become licensed, and what is the process through Foster Kinship?
So let's talk about licensing first. It's simply the process of being approved as a foster parent and receiving the same rate of pay that traditional foster parents receive. And your home is checked for safety and you receive training. For kinship families, there's a misconception that training is like a parenting class or something where they'd be with other foster parents and they don't need it. It's nothing like that. It's just for kinship families. We talk about how to navigate the system that you're in, how to deal with difficult behavior from the children who've experienced trauma, abuse, and neglect, how to deal with your own family members. So if it's your son or daughter's children, those family dynamics are so different than traditional foster parents deal with. They are intense. You know everyone in your family system, and that can be really hard when you step in and change your role. So we talk about dealing with that. We talk about the differences between guardianship and adoption and reunification, how to co-parent. So it's really tailored to kinship family dynamics, their situation, and just the basics. What do you need to know now that you're in this foster care world? We want everyone to get licensed, and we want them to receive the training that will help them be the most capable caregivers of kids who've experienced something difficult.
And I'm glad you bring up that family dynamics of everybody in your family, and what if you're your grandma, but now you've had to step in and become foster mom to your grandchildren. And so how do you support those families through this really difficult transition?
When families first come to foster kinship, they are sometimes embarrassed, sometimes feeling shame of what's happened in their family. Certainly, there's a lot of trauma and crisis going on for everybody. What we do at foster kinship is most of us on staff have experience as kinship caregivers, adoptive parents. We are raising children from hard places. So we're able to say, hey, we've been where you've been. We are who you are, and there is no shame or embarrassment in this. You are doing an amazing thing by stepping up. So let's grab a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, sit down and talk about your options and what do we need to do for you so that you can make the decisions that are best for your family.
I love that, that you meet them from a strengths-based perspective. It's like, you are amazing. You are caring for this child. That is huge. That's amazing. And so we applaud every relative and kinship caregiver that steps forward to provide this type of care for their kids.
Yes.
And I love to know that your staff has been there, because I think one of the things that we hear from like our traditional foster parents is, you know, like, I was so nervous starting out because of the unknown. But if you have somebody that's walking alongside of you, like your family advocates at Foster Kinship that have said, I've done this, we can get through this together. Yeah. That's supportive.
The peer support is the number one reason why it works. Knowing all of the technical things that we know at Foster Kinship is helpful, but we can't get anywhere if families don't trust that we have good intentions of taking them where they want to go. So without that peer support, this doesn't work. It just doesn't.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the technical type of supports. So I've been to your new office, which is so fantastic. There's training rooms, there's like a child care area. Tell me about some of these very specific services. I think you guys even have a social worker or somebody that can help you with social service supports. So tell me about that.
We do. Our main program is called the Navigator Program, which is simply what it sounds like. We are helping you navigate these systems, figure out what you are eligible for, how to get it, and we'll make sure you get it. So for families that may be eligible for something like welfare benefits, let's say food stamps or cash assistance, we have workers right on site that will get you approved at our office while your kids are cared for in our child care program. We will offer, car seats, beds, diapers, clothing from our market called Marcy's Heart. And then we'll make sure that if you need respite care, we can offer that through our child care program. If you just need a support group of other caregivers, we have so many options, including online. So really at our office, it's a one-stop shop for everything a family will need. And you have that family advocate connecting you to community resources at Foster Kinship, everything that DFS can offer, making sure that there's just a system around that caregiver so that they basically can stabilize.
And I love that throughout all of these services, a family can come to Foster Kinship. Let's say you've got littles that really need a lot of attention, but you're trying to go through some of this documentation and paperwork, and instead of having, to keep your kids busy with snacks and the iPad and, whatever else it might be, you have loving, caring providers that the kids can go have a great experience. They can play, they can be together, they can get that one-on-one attention from your providers. And then really that relative caregiver has the mind space, that let's really focus on getting these resources taken care of. Because I could imagine if you're trying to do this at home or online, and you're trying to fill out these applications, and it would be hard to manage all of that. And so you might give up.
Families do give up. So first of all, kinship is so complicated that even other professionals in other fields that touch kinship care will maybe provide information that's not accurate about what they're eligible for. So when they're going out, especially if you're dragging kids with you to all these offices and getting denied for things because you weren't eligible for it, families just sometimes throw up their hands like, what am I doing? I've stepped up and now no one is really able to get me the help that I thought I could get. So being able to have it all in one place with accurate information. We know exactly what you're eligible for. We're going to help you get it. And then you go be a family. We're always here for families. They're never kicked out of our program. Our door is always open. But a lot of times once families are stable, they're just going to go and be a family. And they don't necessarily need ongoing, constant intervention from, government services or nonprofits like ours.
And I also heard you talk about Marcy's Heart, which is your market. Tell me about Marcy's Heart.
Marcy's Heart is unique in Las Vegas because it's for the caregiver. So we accept donations of all kinds. We, of course, give out items for kids, but that's just you get a child in your home, we'll give you a bag of things for that child. But every month, if you want to come to the Caregiver Corner Market and just shop for yourself, of course, it's free. But we want caregivers to remember how valued they are, that we're thanking them. We want them to take care of themselves. If you don't take care of yourself, it's really hard to take care of children. And so we want them to not sacrifice everything, but remember to care for themselves so that they can pour everything that they have left into those kids.
So when these caregivers can come and pick up items for themselves, what kind of things are we talking about?
We have, right now we have a lot of really beautiful shoes, but we have, a lot of clothing items, and we specialize in the kinds of clothes that we found caregivers want. So it's not a lot of business suits. Like, we know you're running around all day. You need something comfortable, easy to throw on, so you can go run around after kids all day. And then we have a whole lot of gifts from the community. So anything we have, we give out. And so it's like a fun store to come and shop for free. Every month there's something different. Right now we have all the swimsuits and summer items out. So we invite our caregivers to come and just remember themselves so that they can go back into the chaos of raising kids.
Right. And so I love that because there's a lot of resources out there for items for kids and care, like through Peggy's Attic, through our own county donation center, we can offer stuff for kids. Marcy's Heart offers stuff for kids. There's other closets throughout the county. But that is unique. I didn't know that caregivers can go and get something special for themselves.
Yeah, it's really for them and for our teens, so the teens can come shop as well. So we have a junior section. Because you can't choose clothes for a teen. They need to come and pick it out themselves.
You're 100%
I will not ever
correct
get it right.
there. Yes. Okay, so I love that. So let's go back to the licensing and the training. It sounds like it's different from what you go through our county traditional caregiver, foster parent. Like, let's say anybody thinking about becoming a foster parent would come and do training through the county. But the training through Foster Kinship really addresses those specific barriers that you might experience in fostering a relative's child. And then what happens once they finish their training? Then what happens?
So, again, we'll walk alongside a family in the whole process, of which training is just part. And I should mention, too, that our training is available online or in person with childcare. So no matter what the situation is, there is no barrier to getting the information that you need. But once the training is done and the licensing piece is done, the family will be able to become licensed and receive reimbursement for the kids in their home. It's the best kind of rate of pay you can get, better than going through welfare. So, and then really they'll just be maintaining like any other foster family, except for with the support to deal with that kinship layer from Foster Kinship always.
Perfect. And we hear too from Clark County Family Services, from the relative caregivers that are taking in their relatives' children, that the support they receive from Foster Kinship is just phenomenal.
Oh, good.
They have such a great experience working with your advocates. They feel fully supported, like that, when they first, I've spoken with some of your kinship families that said, all of a sudden I was approached, can I take this baby into my family? And I haven't had a baby in 26 years. I don't even know what products to get or what to do. But then once they receive the support from Foster Kinship, they're like, we're good.
Yeah.
Everything's great. I'm happy to have this baby in my life. It's strengthened the relationship that I have with my daughter or my son because they've seen that I've stepped up and we're supporting each other through this process.
And it's good that you mentioned that because we feel the whole family should be supported in these situations. So Foster Kinship even has a program just for parents who are doing reunification or wanting to learn how to co-parent called Family Forward, where they can take advantage of all the services as well. And the whole family unit, if that's appropriate for them, can be working together towards the well-being of the children. So we welcome all the family to come. It's not always the easiest thing in the beginning, but we've seen so many beautiful reunification and success stories. And really, it's about what's best for kids, and everyone loving and working in their best interest is best for them.
That's great. I also was not aware that you have this program to support those biological moms and dads, that they really are working to make a better environment and to safely welcome their kids home.
That's
So
right.
to have that added support for those biological families is amazing. I don't think that there's, and right when I think foster kinship does it all, you just go ahead and introduce another program. So let's talk about, how do people access foster kinship? How can they find you? How can they become involved? What steps do they need to take?
So there's no wrong way to get help from foster kinship, but if DFS has asked you to take a relative's child, there'll be an automatic referral made to our intake unit, and we'll be reaching out via text and phone call. Sometimes families are a little bit hesitant at first, like I already have this caseworker, who's this other person calling me. And so if they choose not to engage right away, that doesn't mean they can't change their mind in a few weeks or even a few months and say, oh no, now I do want support. How can I get it? Just walk in, call, email. There's no wrong way. We're always happy to help kinship families.
Perfect. And you have a website.
Fosterkinship.org.
That's
It's got
easy.
everything on it, yes.
Fosterkinship.org. So you offer support groups and sometimes special events for kinship and relative caregivers. Tell me what the support groups are like.
So we have support groups that are truly like just caregiver support groups that are caregiver led. And it's just, I'm having a horrible time with a child, or I'm really struggling with my daughter right now. And it's just a safe place to talk about kinship issues. We also have groups that are more focused on dealing with difficult behavior or trauma-informed parenting strategies. So we have a lot of support groups. We have a Spanish-speaking support group. They're in person, they're online, they're hybrid. We have childcare. We'll offer transportation help. So there's, at least one or two a week, and we have everything on our website. So once the family gets connected with us, we're trying not to overwhelm them with all the things that we can do for them, but we will tailor sort of like, oh, it sounds like you're having a hard time with your child in pre-K. Why don't you come and do our pre-K program with your kids so they can get some social emotional support while you take a break, and then hopefully they can get into a traditional pre-K setting once they work with our team. So we'll just tailor it to what the family needs. But we offer quite a lot of support.
Well, and I think through support groups, you mentioned before that there can be this level of shame and this embarrassment that, my family's in this situation. But when you go to a support group and you hear that other people's situations might be similar, you don't feel so alone.
Right. Yeah. And that feeling of dispelling that you're the only one doing this, when you see there's literally hundreds, if not thousands of other families in this area right now caring for their kin, you are not alone, and we do everything we can. We might be the first folks that have ever thanked them for stepping up, but the most joyful thing for me in this role is creating like a container of caregivers. So if I just create space for caregivers to connect to each other, they make these beautiful friendships, and I've seen families leave a support group and for years their kids grow up together and they're just supporting each other naturally and organically, and that's the best thing. So you're not alone. There's someone who's going to, not just us, there's people out there who will become your advocate too, and your friend when your own family might be upset with you. There's a whole bunch of folks that get it and will step in and support you.
And it's hard, people have a hard time seeking help and saying, I need some resources, I need help. But I think that foster kinship does such a good job to open that door and make it feel very inclusive. And I love your Facebook. I follow your Facebook. So that's even one small step. If you're caring for a relative's child, even following foster kinship on Facebook and hearing some of these small tips that you give out on, how to stabilize your family, how to really best, serve the kids that you're caring for, that's helpful too.
And, research finds is a little silly, but even knowing that there's support available feels better And even if you don't access it, knowing that you could actually helps. So we put everything on our website. So if you're like me and you're kind of afraid to pick up the phone or talk to someone, or it doesn't feel like you want to start there, you can visit all the things on the website and see what it is that might be something you're interested in before you even need to talk to a human. So we don't want to gatekeep any resources. However you want to get help, we want to provide it.
And you have a podcast as well. Tell me about your podcast.
We're totally focused on trauma-informed strategies for parenting because we know that all kids who can't live with their parents have very similar issues in terms of the trauma that they've experienced from separation and then potentially, abuse or prenatal exposure and brain differences. And as a adoptive parent myself of a child with special needs, knowing how to parent differently than you would with a child that you have naturally is really important. It's a different skill set, and we want to make sure that everyone has access to that throughout the lifespan of their journey with these children because it is a hard challenge and it never ends and it's different every year with your kids. So we really focus, once you're through stability, is how do we help you break cycles in your family? How do we help this child thrive, not just be stable, but how do we get into a thriving place? And so our podcast is about trauma-informed parenting strategies.
I love that, trauma-informed parenting strategies. And you said, it changes year to year. It could change day to day.
It can.
It could change hour to hour.
Yes.
So, but in the grand scheme of child development, we know that a protective factor in raising your kids is learning about parenting, learning about child development. And so I love your podcast. I share it on our own Clark County Family Services Facebook page. Tell people how to find your podcast.
I think it's one of the first links on fosterkinship.org. It says blog and podcast, and then you can just click right into it. You can also, if you have Spotify, just search for Foster Kinship and you'll find it.
Cool. And so I love that you share real tips that people can do today while they're parenting, especially parenting relatives' children, but really any parent could benefit from these tips.
Yes, especially if you're foster, adoptive, kinship. All of us are in the same boat when it comes to raising children. And so we find a lot of affinity in the larger community. And also our podcasts are short, so you can listen to it even if you have 5 minutes alone in the bathroom or in the car driving somewhere. You can just get that tip. It's not a big investment. So we encourage people to listen.
Perfect. It's very digestible content. Cool. All right, Allie, what have we not covered? Is there anything that we're missing about foster kinship?
I think the most important thing that I can share is that if you're a kinship caregiver or feel like maybe you need to step in at some point in the future, if you sense like things aren't going well with a son, daughter, brother, sister, reach out to Foster Kinship for help. And we do one thing really well, and that's we know kinship care. So we'll be able to absolutely meet you where you are and figure out what is your next steps and make sure you don't feel alone. So if you get connected to us, then everything else is open.
Perfect. So Foster Kinship is our one-stop shop. Everything kinship caregiver. They can care for your kids while they're making sure you're connected with resources. It really is such an incredible, amazing resource that we have here in Clark County. And our team at Family Services is beyond grateful for the partnership that we have with Foster Kinship. Your team makes our team's job so much easier, knowing that you're out there really wrapping around those relative and kinship caregivers. So we cannot thank you enough for the important work that you're doing.
Well, and we're so grateful to have this really healthy partnership with child welfare and with DFS. I mean, it's really unique in a lot of states and jurisdictions. And so what we're able to do together for kinship families and for children is really special. So we're grateful.
Great. Well, Allie, thank you so much for being here today. And thank you for everything that you're doing for our kinship and our relative caregivers. And most importantly, those kids that are being cared for, the babies, the children, the teens, the brothers and sisters, all of the kids with special needs. Your organization is really providing that structure, that backbone for that stability for these children to become healthy, stable, and ultimately thrive in their childhood.
You said it perfectly. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Allie. So if you've been watching the Foster a Leader podcast now for a few episodes, you know that the need for foster parents in Clark County is dire. If you have ever thought about becoming a licensed foster caregiver, now is the time. You can take your first steps in becoming a foster parent by visiting clarkcountyfostercare.com. You've heard about relative caregivers today, but the need for our regular licensed foster caregivers is still there. We need about 250 to 300 more foster homes. So please, if you have ever thought about fostering, now is the time. Again, clarkcountyfostercare.com, and we'll see you the next time on the Foster Leader Podcast.